Hey, welcome to the show. Time to talk about Europa League and Conference League because, well, I was gone the whole last week. If you watch the other videos, you know why. We'll start with Europa League. The quote-unquote Flash Score calls it the fucking semifinal of the Europa League qualifying, which means if you get out of this round, then you have an opportunity to get into the Europa League. Honestly, I find Conference League maybe even more interesting because if you lose in this round, you go to the Conference League, you still have an opportunity at a European group stage. But anyways, we'll start at the bottom, work our way up. The first team that got through was Rijeka. They beat Shelbourne out of Ireland 3-1. This is actually an overturning of the first result, which is incredibly disappointing for Shelbourne because they were actually the team that was at home here. They stunned Rijeka in Croatia. I said at the time reviewing those first round of results that Rijeka was the better team. They should somehow be able to handle this. They did. They ended up taking the lead in the 73rd minute, and even though it was tightened up by Shelbourne, there was a 90th minute winner in there to make it 4-3 on aggregate. So you got immediate drama on drop here in the Europa League from Rijeka, but they are still going. One of the Croatian teams that's not Dinamo Zagreb, but is still good. You had RFS from Latvia against KUPS from Finland. RFS, everybody's favorite Europa League stage team last year. They are out. They're headed to Conference League qualifying. KUPS from Finland is now one match away from the Europa League stage, which is a big piece of news for the Finnish league. Midtjylland managed to finish off Fredrikstad. They were up 3-1 on aggregate before, so the Danish team beats the Norwegian team, and it is still Bodo Glimt, and then basically everybody else when it comes to the Norwegian league. That sends them down, obviously, to qualifying for the Conference League. Say it together. You have Pauk and Wolfsberger. This was a hum-diddly-dinger. No goals in 180 minutes between the Austrian side and the Greek side, which is disappointing for the Greek side. The Greeks have been on fire recently as a league. Took them to the 115th minute, but they did find a late goal. Some late drama from my boy Matti Kamara, one of the star players for the Ghanaian national team, who put the ball in the back of the net, meaning Pauk Thessaloniki has a shot at the Europa League stage while Wolfsberger's headed to the Conference League qualifying next round. Then there was this one. My whole reason to want to make this video in the first place, Lincoln Red Imps, who managed to pull a 1-1 in the first leg at home against Noah out of Armenia. But to go all the way across Europe, all the way from Gibraltar to Armenia, and bring that ability that direct, it's insane. They managed to keep the ball out of the back of the net. They got it to a penalty shootout. The penalty shootout went 7 attempts, by the way. They only missed their first. And now you have a Gibraltarian team in Lincoln Red Imps that is a hair's breadth away from their second ever European group stage. That's right. They've actually made it before, but it was kind of a COVID make. And so this would be their first legit make. In fact, they have guaranteed they will be in a European group stage with this win, because if they lose in the next round of Europa League qualifying, Lincoln Red Imps will be playing in the Conference League group stage. This is a team that plays in the Gibraltarian League, a nation that has legitimately one functional field, the Europa Point Stadium in Gibraltar. I have been there. It is a beautiful, small stadium, and that is where the entire league occurs. It's where every team practices. It's insane, right? The fact that they were able to do this. Noah, of course, made a European group stage last time around. It was a bit of a surprise, but they're a competent team, for sure. A team I would have expected to beat Lincoln Red Imps. But Lincoln Red Imps, the best way I can say this, they're hardos. They're the hardos of the Gibraltarian League, and they have taken the Gibraltarian League's ceiling to some sort of logical extreme. Brann out of Norway, undone by, Brann out of Norway survived BK Häcken's comeback attempt, a 2-0 win on the road in Sweden. A huge win for Brann. There was an own goal for BK Häcken, but they couldn't pull off the multi-goal victory on the road, which would have been surprising. So you do have a Norwegian team that could make it into the Europa League stage, which would be a huge help for Bodo Glimt, as I was talking about them earlier. Zrinski out of Bosnia and Herzegovina has eliminated Breidablik. This is a dealer's choice type matchup. Breidablik has been playing well. The Icelandic team, Bosnia and Herzegovina's league, really has not been able to produce that much of note until last year in European competition. In general, Zrinski is the best team in Bosnia and Herzegovina, and they managed to get a 2-0 lead by the 47th minute. They jumped on it early. It was Zrinski basically up the entire time. But in Iceland, in Kópavogur, which is right, it's like where the airport is in Iceland. It's like just outside of Reykjavik. Everybody in Iceland kind of lives in the same area. It feels like they were not able to get it done in the last half an hour to close that gap. So they're headed to Conference League. Utrecht against Servette. Brutal draw for Servette. They're a good team out of Switzerland. They've had good runs in Europe over the last couple of years, but Utrecht beat them 3-1 in the first leg. Then they got to come home. Basically impossible for Servette to mount a comeback. So now Utrecht, a team, the Dutch league, you'd be expecting them to make a run in this stage of this competition. Then there's the tough draws. Shakhtar Donetsk against Panathinaikos. This is brutal. It ended up going to penalties after no goals were scored. Do make sure to note the fact that there was a red card issued in the 82nd minute for this Osherenko guy. But 0-0 for 210 minutes to penalties. Panathinaikos gets through. So PAOK Thessaloniki and Panathinaikos out of the Greek league living dangerously, but they're both through. The Ukrainian league, unsurprisingly, given the state of affairs in their home country and the fact that they're basically playing neutral site everywhere for this sort of stuff, has started to kind of fall off. We're seeing Ukrainian teams not be able to compete at the level that they were able to compete at before, which is obviously sad. Not a lot you can do about it right now. Not a lot I can do about it while making this video. Maccabi Tel Aviv beats Hamrun out of Malta. It's a very good draw for them. Hamrun would be incredibly happy to make it to this stage. They'll be going to a Conference League playoff to try to get through. Maccabi Tel Aviv is going to be in a European League stage. They have won this the 5-2. There was a chance maybe for Hamrun to make it interesting. They had a penalty they missed in the 28th minute after losing the first leg 2-1 at home in Malta. After they missed that penalty, the writing is on the wall at that point. Then there's FCSB, good Romanian team, got a good draw as well against Drita. Won the first leg 3-2 at home, took care of business on a road trip to Kosovo, 2 goals in the first 18 minutes. And Drita does have a chance to make a European group stage. FCSB, clearly a better team. Then there's Braga. They beat Cluj out of Romania 2-0, 2 goals in the first half to take care of what would be a 4-1 aggregate win. The Portuguese side seeing away sturdy, if not great, Romanian opposition. And then Legia Warsaw against AEK Larnaca. The Cypriot League is great, right? You've got Paphos making a Champions League run. Now you've got AEK Larnaca. They won this first leg 4-1 before a road trip to Poland. It looked like Legia Warsaw might be able to do something here. They got 2 goals in the first 16 minutes, but AEK Larnaca was able to kind of settle the game down. They didn't get completely blown away. And even though it was, at that point, 4-3 on aggregate all of a sudden, they got that goal in the second half to appease things. A red card maybe made that, you would be nervous at that point. But you've got a couple of Cypriot teams that are looking good for surprise runs into European group stages. And that brings us to the Europa League draw for basically the final round. Now, these matches just happened the day I'm recording this, so the editor's going to kind of blur that column so that you don't see those results if you want to hear about them from me in a day or two. But the final draw, which means the winners of these ties are going to go through to the Europa League stage. Maccabi Tel Aviv against Dynamo Kiev, who has dropped down into this. You've got a couple of teams that have dropped down in Shkindija and Ludogorets. They've dropped down from Champions League qualifying. One of those teams, Shkindija out of Macedonia, would be a big surprise, is going to go through. A couple more drop downs, Slovan Bratislava and Young Boys in the Europa League. Opportunity there for both those teams. Malmo and Sigma Olomouc have appeared here. I believe Sigma Olomouc was a seeded team to appear in this round while Malmo dropped down. Then you see Panathinaikos taking on Samsunspor from Turkey. Panathinaikos, of course, having survived Shakhtar Donetsk. FCSB will be squaring up with Aberdeen. Aberdeen has popped up in this round based off where they finished in their league with a shot to get into the Europa League stage. Lech Poznan's going to be taking on Genk. Midtjylland is going to be matched up with the Finnish team KUPS, who's got to be very happy that even if they lose that tie that they're obviously an underdog in, they're going to be in the Conference League stage. Lincoln Red Imps gets a brutal draw against Braga, so the Conference League looks like it might be calling their name. Zrinski out of Bosnia gets Utrecht out of the Netherlands. Utrecht going to be very happy with that draw. Bran and AEK Larnaca are matched up. Norway against Cyprus, opposite ends of Europe. And then Rijeka against PAOK Thessaloniki. You get the Croatian side against the Greek side. 2 countries that not a lot of people usually think about this. Basically neighbors, depending on where on the sea you decide to hang out. And now we get to enter the Conference League discussion. This is the second to last round. Conference League is unique. There's so many teams dropping down. Everybody has to go through at least one qualifying round in the Conference League. No ifs, ands, or buts. right? And if you advance out of this round, you go to the final qualifying round and you catch all the other teams dropping down. A lot of the teams that I just mentioned that lost their matches will be involved when we look at the bracket of this. Başakşehir against Viking out of Norway. Tough draw for Viking. Turkey, obviously, going to be one of the biggest leagues that's got teams in this, because you only have kind of one team from the big 5 European leagues, right? And so getting a Turkish team is a tough draw. 4-2 on aggregate. Easy enough for Başakşehir. They would be very disappointed if they did not get all the way through. Astana out of Kazakhstan, who's having a pretty good European qualifying. They've got a team in the final round of Champions League as well, but Astana is out. They lost 3-1 in Switzerland against Lausanne Sport. Lausanne Sport managed to go on the notoriously brutal road trip to like northeastern Kazakhstan and take care of business with a 2-0 win. So Astana is out. Lausanne Sport is going through. Levski Sofia has defeated Sabah Baku. This is, you usually just don't see any Azerbaijan teams that aren't Karabakh by this point in qualifying, and this is why they're just not very good. Levski Sofia won 2-0 on the road, 3-0 on aggregate for the victory. Sparta Prague against Ararat Armenia. Big surprise to see an Armenian team at this stage. Sparta Prague, completely different level. They won 2-1 on the road for a 6-2 aggregate victory. So obviously congrats to Sparta Prague. Then there's a nice fun matchup between teams you never hear about, from leagues that you never hear about, just so as it happens. Differdong out of Luxembourg against Levadia out of Estonia. This is what the Conference League is all about, giving clubs that rise, that are able to get on other fields and compete and beat equivalent teams across Europe the opportunity to maybe show their stuff. And this was a fun one. Levadia won the first leg 3-2, and then we got into some wild action because 89th minute, Differdong ties the aggregate at 3. Then Levadia scores in the 92nd minute to take the lead 4-3 on aggregate before Differdong scores in the 105th plus 2, little stoppage time and extra time, to make it 4-4 on aggregate. And, given that Levadia got a red card a couple minutes later, you had a penalty in the 119th minute to send the Luxembourgish side, the Luxembourger side, through on aggregate 5-4. So oftentimes in these tournaments, it's the matches that you're not paying attention to that give you the best drama. That was the case here as well. Sheriff Tiraspol lost 3-0 in Belgium, so Anderlecht mopped things up in Moldova to knock out the darlings of a couple of years ago. Anderlecht would have been expecting, obviously, to win that. Surprise, Ukrainian team, Polisia Zhytomyr. Now, obviously, we've documented struggles for other Ukrainian teams. They advanced. They won 3-0 in their neutral site home game before losing 2-1 at PAX in Hungary. So Polisia Zhytomyr keeping the flame alive for Ukraine. Obviously, unfortunate for PAX, but you love to see Ukrainian teams do well. Another Azerbaijani team has been put to the sword. This was a bloodbath. Ammonia out of Cyprus, one of my favorite items off the periodic table. 9-0 on aggregate over Araz. Cyprus has hands this year. The Cypriot League has hands. They have talent, and they've completely dismantled an Azeri team there. Rosenborg against Hammarby. A lot of Scandinavian showdowns going down in Europe right now. Took to the 59th minute of the second leg to get a first goal in this. Rosenborg did win. So the Norwegian League, even though I knocked it earlier, is getting better. And, this is a matchup, I would say, of teams that both would be hoping to win this tie. Rosenborg was able to deliver on the road, getting outshot 18-8. So they're coming away with a pretty significant smile on their face. Good for them. Gjor out of Hungary against Ike out of Sweden. Gjor overturned. You don't see this a lot at this stage, when you got 9-0s flying around. Overturned the first leg result. It was 2-1 to Ike out of Sweden. They won that at home. Gjor won 2-0 at home. They equalized the aggregate in the 34th minute and left the drama to the 60th minute, which was 9 minutes after Ike missed a penalty that could have put them in front. So, Saletros is, he's not having a good time right now. He's not enjoying the fact that Ike have been eliminated from Europe when Gjor out of Hungary has kept things going. Not a team that I'll admit I know much about. Vaduz out of Liechtenstein. Love the fact that Vaduz managed to get to this round, second to last round. They drew AZ. That is a brutal draw. Very respectable to only lose this 4-0. They lost 1-0 at home after a 7th-minute red card for AZ. That is real solid. It was a Troy Parrott 88th-minute pen for AZ that saw out Vaduz. but they did Liechtenstein proud here. They, of course, don't even have a full league in Liechtenstein. Vaduz plays in they play in the Swiss league system, and Vaduz qualifies for this stuff by winning the Liechtenstein Cup. That's why you normally don't hear about them. Little Scandinavian showdown, Denmark against Vikinger Reykjavik. This was a stunner. Absolute stunner. One of those matches that you look at and you just can't even imagine what it was like to play in or watch. All right, Vikinger Reykjavik, maybe not the surprise. One of the biggest surprises of the first round of matches at this stage is that Vikinger Reykjavik at home in Reykjavik, Iceland, won 3-0 against Brøndby, a club that is significantly bigger. Obviously, they're in the Danish league. They're one of the biggest clubs in the Danish league. They should not, they cannot, they will not lose 3-0 in Reykjavik, but they did. Then in the second leg at home, they get an 18th minute red card. They score 1 goal right before the half, and then 2 more just instantly in a 5-minute stretch in the second half, and then they add another one, right? Because this only ties the aggregate in the 71st minute. A wave of substitutions for Vikinger Reykjavik can't bring it back, and Brøndby, playing a whole game with 10 men, managed to find 4 goals to overturn a 3-goal deficit. Stardust. Magic. Heartbreaking for the underdogs, Vikinger Reykjavik, who had it in the bag. But maybe they thought they had it in the bag too much. And Brøndby has managed to avoid, they've managed to avoid embarrassment in one of the most spectacular ways. Riga FC, out of the Latvian League. Latvian League has hands. We saw RFS last year make it to the Europa League stage. Latvian League is growing. Riga FC won 3-0 at home against Beitar Jerusalem. Beitar Jerusalem at home, they started to turn the tables quickly. They got 2 goals in 24 minutes. And then they were not able to find another one. Well, they did in the 94th, but the problem is Riga FC scored in the 86th to basically put it away. Riga survives 4-3 on aggregate, and we have a Latvian team, a couple of Latvian teams with RFS dropping down with an opportunity to get into the Conference League stage. Arda out of Bulgaria beats Kauno Žalgiris out of Lithuania, and that was a comfortable result because they got 2 goals in the first 12 minutes to carry a 3-0 aggregate score. And then my heartbreak. Absolute heartbreak. My boys from Klaksvik, a team that made the Conference League group stage, the first ever Faroese team that had ever made a league stage or group stage of any kind in Europe. They were up 2-0 on aggregate. And as you can see in the box score, even though they were on the road against, in Belarus against Neman, it was still 2-0 on aggregate until the 80th minute. And then the dam broke. They got another goal in the 84th. It goes all the way to penalties, and Belarus pitches a perfect game. 5 for 5 on the penalties. 1 miss for Klaksvik, and a Faroese team has bit the dust. Neman overturns a 2-goal deficit in the final 10 minutes of the tie to advance and keep Belarus's hope of a league stage appearance alive. Maccabi Haifa out of Israel defeated by Rakov out of Poland. They went to Poland and won 1-0, and then in a pretty big surprise twist, Rakov, not one of the big teams in Poland traditionally, got a goal, then a red card, and then a second goal, a penalty in the 76th minute to send the Polish team through and knock out Maccabi Haifa. Lugano against Celje. Celje had a pretty magic run in Europe last year. It is still going because I don't even know how, dude. They beat Lugano, a perfectly respectably solid team out of Switzerland, 5-0 in the first leg. This random team out of the Slovenian league, they were like 5th in the Slovenian league. They're not even the best team there. I have no idea what's happening here. They're just European titans. They gave up 4 goals. It was a flurry late, 81st, 85th, even 69th right there, which nice. 7-4 on aggregate. Celje sees it out with a 5-0 win on the road. Like, what is even happening in these matches? I have no idea. Celje is through. Lugano out of Switzerland is out. Besiktas sees away St. Patrick's 7-3 on aggregate. But it was 4-3 on aggregate after a couple of stunning goals from St. Patrick's out of the Irish League. Besiktas was definitely sweating it at home before they could actually stretch things out. The Cypriot team has been defeated, though, by AEK Athens. It was 2-2 in the first leg. AEK Athens comes home, takes the lead, gives it back, couple of pins, just 11 minutes apart. Then in extra time, a couple of goals to give Ike Athens some breathing room. And finally, somebody can beat a Cypriot team. Jagiellony out of Poland, one of the darlings of the Conference League last year. I believe they made it all the way to the quarterfinal. They have survived a comeback attempt by Silkeborg with a goal in the 87th and 95th minute that closed the aggregate from 3-0 to 3-2. Shout out to Silkeborg for making it interesting, but Jagiellony continues. Trnava out of Slovakia against Craiova out of Romania. Vintage Conference League nonsense going on here. 3-0 to Craiova. Craiova then makes it 4-0 on aggregate before Trnava makes it 4-4 on aggregate just to send it to extra time and then blow it. They were down 4-0 and then scored 4 straight goals at home. The environment must have been insane in Slovakia, but then Craiova somehow manages to regather itself and see them away. Linfield out of Northern Ireland against Vikinger out of Faroe Islands. That's right, there were 2 Faroese teams in this round. Vikinger won at home 2-1, but Faroese teams don't do quite as well when they have to leave their incredibly cold rock home. And Linfield was able to win 2-0 with 2 first-half goals at home. Vikinger could not create enough. We saw this in the first game as well, but they just have basically none of the ball, and they end up dropping it. So Linfield, Northern Ireland, normally they would be the underdog. They get a good draw against a Faroese team. They're able to see it out. Could have a North Irish League team going into the actual league stage of the Conference League, which would be pretty wild. Rapid Vienna and Dundee United. This is a great matchup. 2 teams from kind of that middle tier of league in Europe. 2 teams that are not the biggest team in their league, obviously. Dundee United will feel like they should have had this, though. They had a 2-goal lead on aggregate, in a 4-2 at halftime. Then they give up 2 goals at home. It goes all the way to pens. They literally missed the first pen, and Rapid Vienna hits all of their penalties to knock them out. Absolute heartbreaker, but the Austrian side goes through. Something good for the Austrian league here. Hajduk Split has been absolutely stunned by Dinamo Tirana. Albania's got a team going through to the last round. Hajduk Split, a recognizable second-tier name in the Croatian league that had the lead 2-1 after their home match. You would have expected them to see it out comfortably, but they give up a goal early. That forces extra time. They get a red card in the 78th. And even though they scored first in extra time to take the lead, it was a goal in the 109th and 111th minute that flipped it around for Dinamo Tirana. If you actually were able to put together some sort of red zone type show to go through all of these results, it would be incredible. Speaking of incredible, Virtus out of San Marino is through to the next round. A San Marinese club team is in the final round of Conference League qualifying. They got a great draw against Mosami out of Moldova. They did lose the first leg 3-2 on the road, but 3-0 at home. All goals coming in the second half. Just a massive moment for San Marinese football. They've had a lot of those recently, but Virtus is bringing some pride to the league. Obviously, if they get through the next round, it would be the first San Marinese club to ever make it to a European group stage. We'll have to see what draw they get. Shamrock Rovers dismantled Balkani at home after losing 1-0 in Kosovo. A very impressive second half with 3 goals from the Irish Giants, I would say, giving Shamrock Rovers a chance to get to another European group stage. The Kosovan League's been pretty good, but not good enough. Santa Clara hosting Larne from Northern Ireland. That's a long road trip for them, but a 3-0 win on the road means the 0-0 for Santa Clara was perfectly fine. Larne defeated. Hibernian against Partizan. This was a massive result here because Hibs won 2-0 at Partizan. Then Partizan scored 2 goals in the first half at Hibs before Hibernian scored in the 60th, and then Partizan scored in the 96th minute to force extra time, at which point Hibs managed to score in the 100th minute. I don't believe Hibs has ever been to a European group stage before, so incredible drama. Absolutely incredible drama. And keep in mind, that goal was after a red card. Okay, the 96th minute goal was after a red card. Partizan's obviously feeling like they could have done better. It was an incredible attempt at the comeback, but Hibs, again, they're not Rangers or Celtic, right? They're not even Aberdeen, okay? They're just a team from the Scottish League that's basically always in the Scottish Premiership. They have a shot at a European group stage. That would obviously be huge for them. Olimpia Ljubljana, after a 0-0 in the first leg, going up against Ignatia from Albania, Dua Lipa's homeland, got a goal in the opening 6 minutes, but then Olimpia Ljubljana equalized before there was a goal in the 79th. You're thinking Olimpia Ljubljana, the kind of reigning powerhouse of Slovenia, is going to see it out after a red card, particularly 2 yellows in a minute. Good job by Yahaya there. And then Lushkia in the 86th minute scores to make it 2-2. So they force extra time, but a man down, they just can't keep their legs, can't hold on. Olimpia Ljubljana scores a couple of goals, and a team that is pretty familiar with the Conference League stage takes another step in that direction. Then Ostrava out of Czech Republic. Tough time for the Austrian league. A pretty good league by most accounts. I've seen a match there. Good big stadiums, high energy type league, but 4-3 to Ostrava in the Czech Republic. This was a more tame tie. Ostrava had a 2-goal lead until the 67th minute at Austria Vienna. They were not able to score the 2 goals they needed to force extra time, meaning Ostrava got through. Now, what I know you're really interested in, what are the draws in the Conference League final round? Now, keep in mind there's going to be a lot of these, right, because you have to qualify into it. A couple of teams dropping down or making it to this stage already. Hamrun against RFS. Shelburne against Linfield. So we've got Irish teams, I'm not even getting involved in that. Northern Ireland, having fun, right? Linfield and Shelburne. Linfield, the North Irish team, trying to blast their way through. Then you get an Icelandic team and a San Marinese team, as God intended. Bright to Bleak dropping down to play against Virtus. That is a pretty darn good draw for Virtus out of San Marino. That's a matchup they can win. You've got Drita out of Kosovo against Differdong out of Luxembourg. Drita dropping down from the Europa League qualifying. Noah drops down from Europa League qualifying. Of course, they had a darn good run in Europe last year, a stunning run for the Armenian League against Olimpia Ljubljana, the Slovenian Giants. Brøndby, after huge comeback against Vikinger Reykjavik. What do they get? Strasbourg, a French team. Brutal draw for Brøndby, but they do have the firepower to maybe get through that. Dinamo Tirana, after their surprise win over Hajduk Split, they're matched up against Poland's Jagiellonia. Shakhtar Donetsk and Servette have dropped down to play each other. That's brutal. Both of those teams are good enough to be in the Conference League stage. One of them won't be. Anderlecht against AEK Athens. That is a pretty even matchup. Both of these teams survived their previous round. And then Başakşehir, who flirted with disaster maybe a little bit against Viking. They are taking on Craiova out of Romania, one of those teams I don't know a lot about, but the team that played that wild match in Slovakia where they had a 4-0 aggregate lead, blew it, and won anyways. So who the hell knows what they're capable of? Crystal Palace is matched up against Norway's Fredrikstad. Brutal draw for Fredrikstad. Celje out of Slovenia managed to survive by scoring 5 goals in the first match against Ostrava out of Czechia. That's vintage Conference League. Rakov out of Poland against Arda. Arda is the team that dispatched Lithuania's last competitor in Europe, so screw them, I guess. Hibernian against Legia Warsaw. Not an easy draw for Hibs. You would have hoped for something easier than a team dropping down, especially a team with the pedigree of Poland's Legia Warsaw. AZ gets Levski Sofia. That's a pretty good draw for them. Tough, obviously, for Levski Sofia. Policia Zhytomyr, they get a just assassin's draw against Fiorentina, a team that has nearly won the Conference League on multiple occasions. They are introduced in this round, the Italian side, and they are up against a newer Ukrainian side. Győr out of Hungary gets Rapid Vienna. Rapid Vienna carrying the hopes of Austria, really, in this situation. Those middling Austrian teams have not done very well against their fellow European competition. Then there's Neman out of Belarus, who stunned Klaksvik in the last round. They get a brutal draw. This is what you get for knocking out one of my Faroese teams. They get Rayo Vallecano out of La Liga. And obviously, Vallecano is going to be a huge favorite. Besiktas against Lausanne Sport out of Switzerland. Besiktas got to be the favorite in that one. Santa Clara, the very far-flung participant from the Portuguese league, gets Shamrock Rovers out of Ireland. That is an unpredictable tie, to say the least. Rosenborg, the Norwegian team that survived Hammarby in the previous round, and has made mincemeat of their previous competition. They get the German side. Mainz has dropped into this. That is not a cakewalk for Mainz. That could be difficult. Riga FC, the Latvian team that managed to knock out Beitar Jerusalem in the previous round, they get Sparta Prague. Sparta Prague will be the favorite. I'm saying that mainly because the Latvian league, while it's on the come up, I'm not expecting them to have multiple European group stage capable teams. A couple of drop downs. BK Häcken taking on Cluj in this round. Swedish team probably the favorite because Romania outside of FCSB has not been able to put a lot together. Wolfsberger drops down to take on Ammonia. This is the team that comes out of Cyprus and just abused that Azeri team in the previous round. And now you're caught up. You know everything about the Europa League, the Conference League, and you probably just finished your lunch or your dinner. So that's great. Final round just kicked off. Go watch the highlights. They're fun.